Okay, welcome back. This is video 2 in my intro to Unity. And now we're going to get ready to actually do something inside of Unity, inside the viewport here. Right now, we're going to go up here to Game Object, and we're going to give ourselves a palette or a terrain to work with. We're going to call it, go into 3D Object, down to Terrain, and select Terrain. And it pops in. One corner is at 0, 0, 0. That's why it's all the way off to the side there. If we zoom out using the middle mouse button, we can zoom all the way out and see our entire terrain area. We zoom in a little bit. And we see over here in hierarchy that we now have a terrain. I'm going to go ahead and give this a name now. Since we're going to get started, I'm going to give it, go to File, Save, Scene As. And I'll just call this Unity Demo 2. Okay. And as you can see, now it's no longer called Sample Scene up here. It has taken on the name I just gave it. My main camera is in here, my directional light, and my terrain. Okay. So I'm going to select terrain, and then over here I'm going to select the inspector so we can see the different assets that we have available to work with to shape our terrain. And the first thing I want to do is give it some color so I can kind of see what we're working with. So I'm going to first talk through some of the tools we have to be able to work with the terrain. As you see here in the inspector, we have the transform, its positions, its scale. We have these tools to work with our terrain, to modify it. And then we have a terrain collider, which helps it so that when we put a character on here, we don't fall through and continue falling below it. Okay. So the first one is to raise and lower terrain. And we have some different brushes and sizes for that. And I'm going to demonstrate all these here shortly. And I think I'm going to actually go ahead and jump ahead to this one here in the center of the brush. And I'm going to give it some color so that as I'm working with the terrain, you can kind of see what's happening with it. So I'm going to select the brush. We have some different brush sizes here and different brush styles that we can choose from, and they do all kinds of different things when we paint with them. Down underneath here it says textures. We have no terrain textures defined. Underneath that we have settings, brush size, opacity, so we can change the size of our brush. If I hover over, you see the little blue dots there. If I want to make it bigger than 7, I can scroll it to the right. I can even type in here and change the size, and you can see now that my brush size has gotten much larger. And then opacity has to do with how much paint is put down at a time, if you will, or in this case the texture of the paint. The higher the number, the more solid every time I push the button. The opacity, the lower the number, the less dark it is every time I press the button in paint. And then the target strength. Okay, so target strength is all the way up at 1. We can adjust it down as well. So I'm going to add some terrain textures here. I'm going to hit Edit Textures, Add Textures. And then up here in the left-hand corner, the Add Texture, Terrain Texture box comes up, and you see there's nothing in here. This is a normals map, the one on the right. We're not going to mess with that this time around. Normal maps help to give objects a little bit more of a 3D depth. We are going to go ahead and use this right here, our 2D textures. If you select the Select button, click on the Select button, you can see that the Select Texture 2D comes up, and we have quite a lot of textures to work with. And just to show you, this is a normals map right here. So if we were wanting to do something with normals, we could use these types of maps. Okay, so what we want are ground textures. So I'm just going to type in ground in my search box here. And I put a lot of different colors in here. And I'm going to go ahead and select this one here and hit Add. Now you can see it changed my entire texture to green. And I think I'll go ahead and go with that one. I can also go back and I can add more textures, so hit Edit Texture again, Add Textures, and now if I select ground again, type in ground, I'm going to select kind of a dirt texture. I'm going to hit Add again, And if I use that one, it's not going to turn the entire surface this color. It is going to allow me to come in here and I can kind of paint that color into the surface area. And you can see it has a dirt texture to it. Okay, I'm going to undo that. Alright, so now we're going to go back and we're going to start at the beginning with the ones that have this little mountain is raise and lower terrain. It does exactly what it sounds like. This will raise our texture up and down. But before we get to that one, we're going to go ahead and go to this one next to it. There's two arrows pointing to each other. And this is a paint height. And we can click to paint height, hold shift and click to sample the target height. What I want to do is, because I'm going to make some depressions in the surface, if I were to do it the way it sits now, so I'll show you if I go back to the first one, and I hold the shift button, so you hold shift and click to lower, it doesn't actually lower the terrain because the terrain is already at 0 for the Y. Can't lower what's already at 0. So what I want to do is I want to give it a set, and I'm going to use 20. So right here where it says height under settings, I'm going to type 20, and if I click flatten, it raises my terrain up. Although it doesn't show it here, but it does. Now if I go back to this button here, now I'm going to go ahead and do a little raising of some terrain, kind of give myself some hills. So if I click and kind of drag my mouse around, you can see that I get this terrain that goes up, right? And I can create mountain ranges from this. And what if I wanted to put a lake in here maybe? So that's where the hold shift and click comes into play. If I click now, you can see that it kind of pushes the terrain down, and if I hold it long enough, it pushes it all the way down to 0. And that makes a pretty deep impression. One of the things we got to be careful about is, because we're going to be able to move our characters around in here, unless we want to create a trap, we could accidentally create a trap that wouldn't allow our characters to get out of it by making these holes. They'd basically fall into them and you'd be stuck. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this up just a little bit, and we'll come back and smooth it out. Alright. And it may have raised it just a little bit too much, but that's okay. We'll be able to smooth it down a little bit. If I hold the shift button down, I can push it down a little, and we'll smooth it in a little bit. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and create some more mountains. Kind of give my side of my terrain feature this kind of feeling of some mountains in here. Careful not to make it too tall, I guess. And maybe I might want to have some water feature. Maybe I'll have a little bit bigger lake here. So I'm going to go ahead and just push these down a little bit. I'll have to come back and smooth things out some. Oops. Always Control Z to undo. The shift button down. Maybe I'll make a river through here. We'll have to come back and fix some of this. Okay. All right, and maybe some more mountains down through here. And now I'm going to go ahead and do some depressions around the edge here. So I'm going to put some water in, and I'll show you how to do that here at the end. You may have to come back and smooth these out as well. Alright, we can always come back and clean this up. Alright, so now you know how to make mountains, how to set your limit in heights. We can also put a limit at how tall our mountains will actually go. This right here allows us to smooth out our mountains. So if I were to use it, I can click on these mountains and you can see they kind of start rounding out some of these sharp edges. Okay. And we already went over the terrain. Now about adding trees. Okay, so if we want to add trees, we click on that button, hit Edit Trees, since we don't have any trees in here. And we have this window that pops up and a little circle off to the right here. So if we click on this little circle, and then in here, I could scroll down because there's different types of names. Like here's a broadleaf tree. So if I click on the broadleaf tree, it pops up here and I can hit Add. Sometimes you have to double click that and give it a second. Again, we have brush size and the number of trees that can go with inside of that brush size. So I'm going to scroll this down. I don't want that many trees at once. And I'm going to scroll down my size of my brush because these are some big trees. And now you can see if I hit it, we get trees appearing. And I can click and drag and put in multiple trees. Alright, so that's how we can add trees, and you can add additional trees so you can switch back and forth and have multiple types of trees in here. Now grass and flowers. So I'm going to click on the flowers here, hit Edit Details again, and I'm going to add grass texture. Similar to the trees, it's a box that comes up. We can change the color of our grass, and it uses, we can also change the size of our grass here, and it makes a variable in size and height. I'm going to click on that little button. I'm going to type in grass, and I'm going to pick one of these here because these will give us a three-dimensional grass that we want. And there's a couple different types, so I'm going to go ahead and select that one. I'm going to hit Add, and I'm also going to go back in and I'm going to select the other one. Hit Add, and there we have both of them in here to choose from. Now with grass, you have to zoom in to your terrain to be able to see it. If you're way out, you're not going to see it. So for example, I can zoom out like this, select that. I'm going to adjust my brush size a little bit up. And if I push the button down, it looks like nothing happened. But if I zoom in where I just pushed it, back up a little bit, you'll see that there's the grass. And we were able to draw it in. But it works better if we kind of zoom in and control how we put it in here. And you can see the different variables. We have a lot of dead grass, yellowish grass going in with the green grass to give some variation. Alright, so now we know how to do that. Okay, and you can put different types of grass in, and you can see that this grass is very different than the last one. Alright, so now what we probably want to do is learn how to import our models so that we can set our models up and then make our terrain kind of fit around where our models are. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the video here. It's been about 15 minutes, and I will show you how to do that in video number 3. Thank you, and I will talk to you later. If you like what you see, please remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you.